Hello, how are you? Fantastic. That's good to hear. And if you don't know who I am, well, I'm Prophet Kyle, of course. And as you can see, I'm in a different location. I'm in a park in Jalapa, Mexico. I said that with a strong gringo accent. Jalapa, Mexico. And I'm speaking in English, so that means that I want you to improve your English listening skills. And I just worked out. I was doing exercise, so I'm not very good at thinking right now. I'll use a bit more advanced verb for this. You want to boost your vocabulary. I'm here to help you boost that vocabulary, to increase your vocabulary. So of course there should be subtitles in English for this, so click on the captions button below in order to get some English subtitles. And in today's video I want to talk about the first Colombian I ever met. If you follow me for a while, you probably know that I talk a lot about Colombia, and if you could see my social media statistics, you would see that Colombia is probably the country that supports me the most. So, of course, lots of love for the Colombians. Now, did I always know about Colombians? No, I did not always know about Colombians. Now, the stereotype of Colombians for most gringos, of course, are the narcos, whether it's Pablo Escobar, Medellin cartel, or Cali cartel. But I'm not gonna lie, I was even more ignorant of Colombia than that when I was growing up. I didn't know anything about Colombia when I was growing up. I didn't know about the narcos, I didn't know about Pablo Escobar, I didn't know about Cali cartel, I didn't know what cocaine was until I was like a teenager. I was clueless about Colombia. And of course, I'm talking about the bad side of Colombia, but the bad and the good, I had no idea about Colombia. I couldn't even point Colombia out on a map. And if you saw my other video in English about my first time to Latin America, or my first trip to Venezuela, not until I was 14 years old did I kind of realize that there were other countries in the world besides Europe and North America, and the English-speaking countries and the European countries. So I didn't really start to discover Colombia for real until I was in university. And when I was in university, I began to fall in love with architecture. If you don't already know, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an architect. You know, our parents, they always ask us, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want your profession to be? What is your dream job? And I always loved to draw. So, of course, parents and mothers, they don't want their kids to be I forgot the word in English for this. I completely forgot, but there's more or less, my mom didn't want me to be a poor artist on the streets begging for people to give me money, because the stereotype, I think, in Latin America, it's the same, is that in North America, artists, the majority, don't make a lot of money, and they're usually poor. They don't shower a lot. Hipsters, more or less. So my mother always told me, well, why don't you become an architect? Because an architect draws, but at the same time, they have a job that makes money. So that's what I always wanted to be when I was a kid. But I grew up in a rural part of Canada, in the province of Alberta. So when I was 17 years old, about the time when gringos start thinking about going to university and applying to go to university, I couldn't find any way to study architecture. I didn't know how to do it. And I never went to a fancy school. And all the architecture programs, they asked for special requirements that because I went to a rural school, I couldn't fulfill them. So I gave up on my dream of becoming an architect, and I decided to study political science, which was a mistake, but I like to forget about the past. But when I went to university, I started to fall in love with architecture again. And at that time, that was about 2009, 2010, 2011, that was when Medellin was becoming very famous for its unorthodox public transportation system, with the gondola and being the only city in Colombia that had a metro system, and one of the few cities in Latin America with a good public transport system. So when I was reading the news, the architecture news, of course the architecture, they always talk about urban planning. So I would always hear about Medellin, Medellin, Medellin. So I just thought this Medellin place must be a really awesome place in this country called Colombia. And I realized, oh, Colombia is beside Venezuela. But still, I didn't know that much about Colombia. So that brings me to the point of this story about the first Colombian I ever met. So when I was about 21 years old, I broke up with my first and only serious girlfriend. She was Mexican. She was the one who introduced me to Latin American culture. And I was living with a Mexican roommate from Guadalajara. And so at that time, I only knew about Medellin. That's all I really knew about Colombia, was Medellin and its public transport system. Anyways, my roommate, if there's any Latino guys watching this, he was your stereotypical Latin lover. He was like a Latin lover, but with a little bit of hippie inside him. He was, I think, taller than me. He was about 6 feet tall. I think in metric, that's 182 or 183 centimeters, something like that. He kind of had a mixture between European features and like really indigenous features. Like he had those, I don't know how to say, those like squinty, powerful eyes that you kind of picture with Aztec warriors. But at the same time, he was tall, like a regular European. I had a bit lighter features. Like he's a mix between a famous Mexican actor and like an Aztec warrior. That's how I would describe him. And yeah, he was in great shape. He kept himself in shape. And of course, he was very in touch with his soul and with nature. And Latino guys, if you're watching this, gringas love that. They love, of course, handsome Latino men that are in touch with their soul and in touch with nature. So if you're trying to attract a gringa, that would be your best bet. So anyways, at that time, my roommate, he was single. And I wouldn't say every week, but every few weeks, he would have a different girl over at his home. And one week he brings home a girl, and she is beautiful. She is a beautiful girl. Let me try to describe her. Like I still have her image in my head. She had this really curly hair, really curly hair. If you know Colombia, girls in the costa, on the Caribbean coast of Colombia, they have that really curly hair. So she had that really curly Caribbean hair. She just had these amazing curves. Like coming from Canada and not really meeting many Latinas to that point, like she's had these incredible curves. And just being honest, like her ass was incredible. Like maybe you don't want to hear that, but just being honest, her ass was incredible. So, and beautiful skin. So just like my roommate, he had that beautiful trigueño, mestizo skin. She also had that beautiful, like trigueño, but I guess maybe a bit more of a African touch to it. Just beautiful, beautiful skin, beautiful golden skin, curves, beautiful curly hair, down to here, down to her boobs. And just that Sofia Vergara passion walk, you know, just the way that Colombian women can walk, just very sultry. But again, at that time, that was the first time ever really experiencing that Colombian, Venezuelan sensuality. And I remember seeing her. We lived in the basement of a 2-story house in Vancouver, and I was doing laundry at the time, and she was in the living room, and yeah, she had a big smile on her face, just, hi. And I think I kept my cool, but inside of my head, I was just, she was just gorgeous. But anyways, she was a very friendly Colombian, and that's one thing I love. Well, most Latinos are friendly, but I would say Colombians are some of the friendliest Latinos towards gringos, at least. So she's very friendly with me. She started talking to me. So she started telling me about her. I started telling her about me. She told me she was from Colombia. She's from Bogota. And at the time, so I knew about Medellin, but I also knew that Bogota had the Transmilenio, which was also pretty famous in the urban planning world. So I said, oh, you're from Bogota? I heard about Transmilenio. Of course, most Bogotanos, most Colombians aren't really impressed by the Transmilenio, but for urban planners, they were very impressed with the Transmilenio. So I talked to her about the Transmilenio. She told me a little bit about Colombia. And yeah, very anticlimactic story, but at the same time, because of, I don't want to say that just because of a beautiful woman, I learned Spanish, even though it's kind of true. My first girlfriend was Mexican, so she was a reason I started learning Spanish and getting to know the Latino culture. But I just remember seeing this beautiful Bogotana and thinking, if there are lots of girls like that, then I gotta keep on learning Spanish, because I want to make a woman as friendly, as beautiful, as passionate as that happy. That was my mindset. And yeah, at that time, I broke up with my girlfriend. I was looking for motivation to keep on moving forward with life, and I would say that Bogotana, she gave me a lot of inspiration and motivation to keep on learning Spanish and keep on moving forward, and to get over the breakup with my ex-Mexican girlfriend. So, Colombians, I want to say thank you for making some of the most beautiful women in the world, some of the friendliest women in the world, because they are the reason that I am here right now. And that is the story of the first Colombian I ever met. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully my slower than usual English and my simplified English helped give you more confidence to listen to more English and to keep on learning English as well. Hopefully I can be a motivation for you, just like that Bogotana was for me. And that's it for now. Thank you for listening, and hopefully I will be making more videos about my Latin American experiences in English for you in the future. And of course, if you have questions, let me know below in the comments. I'll see you next time. Bye.